think it's a strange vanity that makes us think we're the only ones in the solar system.
All right, everybody, welcome to Gen X News. Now, I know I used to do 2 shows. I've amalgamated everything into Gen X News, but we will have news, we will have conspiracy theory, but we are still going to have shows about tonight's topic. We're going to be like news, unsolved mysteries, Gen X News, conspiracy theory show. We're going to have everything. And tonight's show is about ghosts because I have author Terri Reid here to discuss this with us. But first, no, we are streaming live right now to X, Rumble, and YouTube. And if you guys could, please subscribe on the Rumble channel. It is pretty new. We got a lot of subscribers on the YouTube, but YouTube is always censoring, and I get more views on Rumble, and it's new with very little subscribers than I ever do with like 1,800 subscribers on YouTube. They've totally throttled me. I just don't trust them. So go to Gen X on Rumble and subscribe there. And of course, we have the audio podcast platforms that I get together after the show. I edit this up, put a little shorter intro and get it up there. You can also download it on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify, all those platforms, and rate us 5 stars so you can help that way. Remember, subscribe, share the content, support all my guests. If you love what you hear, go get their books, go to their websites, all of that stuff. And of course, rate us 5 stars on the podcast. It helps the show grow. And of course, follow me on X. I'm there all the time. Okay, so on to the topic of the show, ghosts. If you know me, you know my entire life. It's the whole basis of my life has been ghosts, I swear to God, in a very positive way. I've grown up with ghosts. I grew up in a haunted house, so I archived a lot. That's why my former show was Ghostly Archives, and I'd done a lot of this, but I kind of branched out into Gen X News. But so that is why I always like when a guest comes on and says, hey, I want to talk about ghosts. I'm like, I'm there. We're talking about ghosts. So tonight I have Terri Reid. She's an author of the Mary O'Reilly Paranormal Mysteries. I believe she has almost 20 books to that, and it's quite fascinating. We'll get into that. She uploaded her first book, Loose Ends, as an independent author in August of 2010. By the end of 2013, Loose Ends had sold over 200,000 copies, and this year she celebrated the 13th anniversary of Loose Ends. In addition to the Mary O'Reilly series, she's written several other series, including The Willoughby Witches, The Blackwood Files, The Order of Brigid's Cross, The Legend of the Horseman, and A Sheer Disaster of Mysteries. So she's also been a top rated hot new release status in the women's sleuth and paranormal romance category through Amazon. And her books have been translated into Spanish, Portuguese, and German. So I'm not going to go, we're going to get into this more. Of course, I want you to visit her website. I'm going to keep showing you her website throughout the show, but I don't want to keep waiting anymore. We'll bring Terri in and she can tell us the rest. Welcome to the show, Terri.
Hi, thanks, Melissa. It's great to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you came on because, like I was saying on the intro, ghosts are my thing. I grew up in a haunted house. I lived in a, you know, I know you talk about a lot of Irish stuff in
Mhm.
like a background. I grew up in a city in a province in Canada. I'm actually originally Canadian. That was like Irish immigrants. My grandfather's family, they're Irish. That's part of the folklore. It's ghosts and everything
Mhm.
seemed to be haunted. So I love that you've come on to talk about your ghost books. So let's hear a little bit of background about you and why ghosts for you.
You know, my background is, well, Heinz 57, but when we do the DNA, the majority is Irish. And growing up, that's what you talk about. You tell ghost stories from Mary Worth. Well, and I grew up in Chicago. So you have Resurrection Mary, but you have all of those other fables in Chicago. And it just, we would sit around and tell ghost stories. But we also, we lived in some places. I remember as I think I was in third grade, I would have a reoccurring dream that I would be on my bedroom floor trying to crawl out of the room, and it was dark and there was a light outside, but the closet door kept slowly opening and it was trying to pull me back into it, and I was like putting fingernails into wooden floors trying to get away. And I dreamt that over and over and over again. It wasn't until I was an adult that my older sister told me that the apartment that we had rented, uh, the person before us had hung himself in the closet of my bedroom. And so I
That's
think
spooky.
that really, so I have had, my mom used to say that when we lived in North Carolina, my dad was a Marine, so we moved around a lot. And we lived in this little house in North Carolina. And she said when I was a toddler, I would sit in my high chair, look past her when she was feeding me in the kitchen into this dark mudroom, and I'd say, "Look, man." And she would think that I was like messing with her mind. But now I think, no, kids see stuff. And I think I probably saw a ghost. So I think that I've had ghostly experiences all of my life. But then when we moved here to Freeport, Illinois, and I was a freelance writer, and I started. So as a freelancer, you have to pitch stories to the editor. And coming from Chicago, I figured there's got to be a Resurrection Mary kind of in Freeport. And so I said, can I do the Halloween feature? Because that would have made me a lot of money. And he said, there are no ghosts in Freeport. And I said, okay, if I can
You're
bring
like,
you
oh
ghosts,
yeah.
yeah, challenge accepted, right? And I thought, if I can bring you ghosts, and so I was the weird mom that at the grocery store, as the checker was, ringing me up, I'd say, so
Mm-hmm.
do you know any ghost stories? And what I started to find is that there wasn't a Resurrection Mary kind of fable story. These people started telling me stories about the ghosts that they lived with, the things that they had encountered. And so the first year I had a 4-page spread in the Journal Standard, our local paper, on the ghost stories of Freeport. And then the next year, to make it easier on myself, I had the local librarian basically have me as an event. And I went in and I told people I would tell them my ghost stories that I collected if they would share their ghost stories. And so I started by telling my ghost stories. And I'm standing in front of this room full of people. I think we've got like 7 rows of chairs, and it's probably 15 feet across. And they're kind of close to each other. So they really can't see each other, but I can see them. And I'm looking out at these people, and somebody over here, over on this side is talking, and the person over there is like, yeah, yeah. And So somebody would stand up and say, "Hey, my name is Evelyn," and everyone would say, "Hi, Evelyn," and they'd say, "I have a ghost," and they'd start. It was like a 12-step thing for ghosts, but people, and this has got to have been 20 years ago, before all of these paranormal shows were on, before, and people love the fact that they could talk about their ghost experience with
Mhm.
people who had had ghost experience and didn't think they were crazy.
What do you think it is about ghost stories that people like to connect? Like it's a very connecting thing.
I think it helps them realize they're not alone, they're not crazy, and there's something more to this life.
Yeah.
It's not, this isn't just the end. It's not, okay, boof, you're gone, but there's something about you that lives on.
Yeah, I always seen ghosts as like a an like history that we don't know. It's like history trying to speak out to us. Like there's official narratives that are probably not so accurate, and I always like see ghosts as no, this is real history. I don't know if we live in like some kind of simulation or there's some kind of weird thing going on, but this is real. It's speaking back to us saying, I was here, this really happened.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
I think through my books, one of the things I like to point out is usually the most evil person, the wickedest person in the book, is the person who's still living. Ghosts are just people who
Hmm.
happen to be dead. And I believe that there are demons and there are other things out there, but ghosts, for the most part, are just people. People who
Right.
still have, either they have a story they need to tell, as you said, the history. I love
Hmm.
that. Or sometimes they're just visiting a place they loved, and they're just there, that
Yeah.
was their routine, and they're following that routine. And sometimes their death was so sudden that they don't realize that they're dead, and so they're just kind of stuck in that place. And battlefields immediately come to mind, that you go to Gettysburg and you can just feel the people that are still there.
They're still
Whether,
there.
yeah, yeah,
Battlefields are a big one because so much crazy energy has been imprinted. I don't know if it's an imprint or they're still there react. I don't know exactly what it is in this crazy universe, but I've heard a lot of stuff about Gettysburg. I've never actually been.
I've
I'd
been a
love to
couple
go.
times. Yeah, it's a cool place. You know, if you can get there during an off season, then it's
Yeah.
a better place to go, because I really think that when you get a lot of people in a situation, it kind of smashes down any of the extra sensory things that are around you. Too many people
Hmm.
walking on that same thing, too many, it doesn't come through. But we've gone like at the end of October, where it's kind of cool and crisp outside, and
Right.
we've walked Gettysburg then, and you can really, well, you can feel the sorrow. I mean, that is abundant, just because these poor, sometimes boys, they were
Yeah.
just doing what they thought was right, but sometimes it's cousins killing cousins. I mean, it was a
Yeah.
sad time, and you can feel that sadness there.
Yeah, I had that. I've had that same experience. Like if I've gone on like ghost hunts where we paid to go, and there'll be certain people in the group that are. I don't want to call them obnoxious. Like we had one girl who was caught. Like there was just a whole bunch of people, and one girl was like, "You want to talk to me, don't you? Like she was just all about herself, and it was really disruptive. And we were trying to sit there, and everybody was like and there was just much energy, like you said, there was just too much going on, and I even though I enjoyed it, I still felt like, God, I wish some people would just be quiet or go away.
And the
Like I
ghosts are
just
probably laughing at
you're
her.
not gonna yeah, well, if they're even there at the
Oh,
time,
right.
and she was like, "Do you?" And she was like, almost like, "Do you want me to spell you and to send you back to the Netherlands? Because I have that power." Like exactly like I just said it.
Uh,
And me and my husband were like, "What?"
Yeah.
what's wrong with you? But it's totally true. Like some people, I don't know. I agree. Like there's if it's too noisy, it's hard to hear because it's a different energy that's probably not as strong. It's sort of a little faded.
Mhm. You know, there's so many now paranormal shows, and one of the ones I loved that I don't think is on anymore was Kindred Spirits, and I loved it because they really respected the people they were trying to communicate with. There wasn't, any screaming or yelling or somebody saying touch me." There's nothing like
Yeah,
that. It was just a
yeah.
very respectful, "Hey, we're just trying to talk to you. We don't want to do you any harm. These people that live here in this house with you are a little bit afraid." And I just thought they handled it really well.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. Like I actually one of the worst I hate I think is it Ghost Adventures?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hate is a strong word.
It's a strong word. I dislike it. Well, I live in Utah and I live in an area where Ted Bundy operated and they went to a Bundy house. So I went there. I live near there. And of course I
Okay.
dispelled like they're like Bundy went there and did his rituals and I dispelled it because there's no way he could have possibly been there. Historically, people lived there at the time and
Okay.
it was just like I was just like I like to dispel the stuff they do because I know they're so I had a friend who worked for a network and he came to them. He did an HBO documentary filming and he came to them saying, "Hey, I want to do a kind of a documentary on the paranormal, like a serious one." And they said, "Well, you won't get any money unless you can make a ghost appear." And he was like, "What?" So that tells you a lot.
That's right.
They have to make something happen. So I was like, oh yeah, right. So anyways, off of that, we got a little off track of that. So you have this in your background. You've always been able to experience ghosts even when you're little. And so did you always write about ghosts or was that something like did you develop a writing career and then you were like, "Oh, I'm going to go back to ghosts?" Like how did that all come in together?
So I did a lot of freelance. I did technical
Mhm.
writing. I did writing for newspapers, feature writing, and things like that. And I always worked on this novel in the background. And so I have to tell you the story behind the main character, Mary O'Reilly. My
Mhm.
sister's name is Mary. And my sister and her now ex-husband were buying houses in Ohio. And I have to say, and I hope I'm not hurting anybody's feelings, but Ohio's a spooky state. They have Mothman, they have a lot of stuff going on in Ohio. So, anyway, they were flipping houses in Ohio. They were buying these not really bad houses, but they were totally remodeling them and selling them. And so her husband was out of town. She had 3 kids at the time. She worked full time, and it was like, I'm thinking she worked till 2 o'clock in the morning, um, peeling parquet floor off the ground, off the floor, by hand with
Mm.
like a chisel kind of thing. Exhausting work. So she finally dragged herself to bed like at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she said she fell asleep and she felt like somebody was watching her. So she woke up, turned around in her bed, and she said there was a Civil War soldier standing next to her bed. And the Civil War had gone right through her area. And he was standing next to her bed and he had his head in his hands. So he had been decapitated. And he was standing there holding, his head, and there were bullet holes in his uniform and they were oozing blood. And he was just standing next to her bed like that. And she looked at him and she said, "I am too tired for this nonsense tonight." She might have used other words. "I am too tired for this nonsense today. You need to leave right now." And this headless thing kind of stopped and shrugged and left. And I thought only my sister would do something like that. It was like, cut the crap, guys. We're not doing this tonight. And
I
when
think I would have screamed.
I know I would have, yes. And I thought about that and I thought, how cool is that? How cool would it be to have a character who would say something like that to a ghost? Who would say, "You know what? I'm too busy for this right now." And then what would cause a character, what would be the circumstances in order for a character to have an attitude like that? And if that
Mhm.
character now always saw ghosts, always communicated with ghosts, so it's not like a big shock. It's like every day that character could do that. So that's what started the whole Mary O'Reilly idea. And so Mary is the second novel. The first novel I wrote, and I'm going to go back this year, I think, and rewrite because it was put out there and it needed refining. After now 14 years of doing this, you can look back and think,
Mhm.
yeah, so, but it was called The Ghost of New Orleans, and it was a story basically about a hurricane coming in to Louisiana and so many people dying because of it. And these this government entity that dealt with moving ghosts on, because if they didn't move ghosts on, people wouldn't want to resettle in those areas because they wouldn't maybe know exactly they were feeling, but they would know they didn't feel comfortable, so they didn't want to build
Right.
a house, or they
They
didn't.
would just instinctively abandon, like, not go there.
Exactly. So they sent in this group. uh, I think it was the Paranormal Research something something. I think PRCD. I'll have to look it up. But so that was my very first book, and I actually sent it out to an agent. And the very first scene is this woman who is a psychic who can see ghosts, and she comes upon this little boy, and he's a ghost, and he had been pulled out to sea. When and he had
Mhm.
been playing, and he climbed up a tree, but it wasn't tall enough. And so she is trying to explain to him that he needs to move on, and he wants to say goodbye to his mom. And so she goes and gets the mom. And the mom at first says, "You're a kook. You're lying to me. How could you do this to me?" And then he feels something tugging on her sweater. And she realizes it's her son. And that's kind of the intro to this story. And I sent it to an agent, and the agent sent it back. She had a 3-year-old son. And she said it was too emotional for her to read. And I thought, well,
Oh.
isn't that a good thing? But she didn't want to
Mhm.
represent me. And so I just kind of stuck that way in a folder, and I thought, oh, I can't do this. And then I started writing Mary O'Reilly.
Wow.
So
I've had that experience watching a movie about I can't remember what it was called, but they eventually there's all these sounds, and their son went missing, and I think they find the dead body in the basement at the end of the movie. I know it's really crazy, and my son was about 2.5 at the time, and I turned it off. I was crying. I wouldn't even. I was supposed to go away out of town for a couple of days and leave my son with my now ex-husband, and I wouldn't go because I was
yeah,
like, well, if my son goes missing in a base, like I can understand it, but I mean, like, yeah, I get that emotion when you're like a new
right,
mom.
right,
I totally
right.
understand.
I remember, I can't. There's a book called Fairy Tale, and it's a book from, I think, the '60s, and I can't remember who wrote it. It's an excellent book, but it's about this family who buys this house, and it's an old house, and the owner just recently died, and this guy has been asked to write a screenplay, I think. And so it's like those Hallmark where they show writers, and oh, he's a writer, so of course he can afford to get this really fancy cabin and do this. Well, this was the same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
a screenplay writer, so all of a sudden he can afford this beautiful home and this estate, but the estate has fairy in it. And
Oh.
they're not nice. They're not Tinkerbells. They're not nice. And there's one scene, he has twin boys who are like 4 or 5, and this thing is crawling up the side of the house to get to the boys. I had to I had my boys were that age. I had to stop. I couldn't.
Uh-huh.
I put that book away for 5 years, and then I could read it. But yeah,
Yeah.
I couldn't read it then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, totally. Totally get that one. So, yeah, and that's the thing. Ghost stories can be super emotional and invoking people's fears, I guess. You best
and
you found that out.
and I think the other ghost stories that can be emotional are, so okay. I have several favorite, but one of these, I before the show we kind of chatted, but I mentioned this doctor who collected all of these ghost stories, and one of the stories was about a brand new doctor who was driving to his very first day at work. He had done a fellowship, he had done everything, and his dad was a doctor. And he called his dad and he said, "Hey, I'm a doctor. I'm on my way to work. My first day." And his dad said, "You're not a doctor yet." And he was kind of miffed. Here he had gone to school, he'd done everything, and he was on to work.
Mhm.
So he kept driving down the road, and then he saw this little boy on the corner of the street, and the boy waved him down and pointed. And down that side street, there was a bus that had careened into a tree and it crashed. And so he parked his car and he went running there, and he was able to get into the back of the bus. And emergency personnel came, and he started triaging these little people and moving them out and moving them out. And finally, he got to the very front of the bus where the worst had happened. And there was a little boy lying on the floor, and he knelt forward and he felt for a pulse, and there was none. The little boy had died. And then he turned the little boy over, and it was the boy who had waved him down from the street corner.
Now, is that a real experience story?
That's a real experience that this doctor wrote from another doctor. So this man called his dad and told him what happened. And his dad said, "Now you're a real doctor."
Wow.
So,
And
yeah.
that really, stories like that, and because we were talking about NDEs and stuff and experiences and how doctors will tell each other those stories like that are what point to, and I think what people like about this topic is that there's something beyond this materialistic sort of culture that we've built up that thinks they have the answers medically. There's something else going on.
Right.
If
Right.
if a clinical person who's a doctor had that experience, I mean,
Hmm.
that would totally shift how you see the world, or at least make you question what you know.
Well, or reinforce what you've always hoped.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. Do you know about, I always say it wrong, Cokeville? Is it Cokeville, Wyoming, that's right on the Wyoming-Utah border? Or is it
Um,
Colville?
I'm not
It's
sure what
one of,
it is.
it's one of those two.
If my husband is listening, type it out if you know, because he's been in Utah all his life. He might
Okay,
know. I'm not sure.
so there's a little town right on the Wyoming Utah border, and in the 60s or the 70s, somewhere in there, this man came and he was nuts, and he created a bomb, and he built it in like a pressure cooker, and it had a detonation that was spring loaded. So if somebody pulled him, it would explode. And he went into a grammar school. And this was before Columbine, before people really started worrying about schools and security and stuff.
Mhm.
And this man got into the school, and he basically moved all of the children in this small school into one classroom. And he had them sitting on the floor. And this guy was nuts. He thought that he could be resurrected. And the more people he brought with him when he died, the greater his resurrection. And so he was there in this classroom holding, oh, thank you. It's Colville.
That's my husband.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
so he basically, and he had his wife with him. And so they had this circle where he sat on a desk with his bomb, and the kids were beyond the circle. And he kept them there, and he kept them there, and you could see he was getting more and more agitated. Well, finally, I think he had to go to the bathroom, so he left his wife with the bomb, and she was a little bit ditzy, probably a lot ditzy. And anyway, the bomb went off in the classroom, and he came in, and I don't think he was caught in it, but basically, oh, thank you. It's not quite on the border, but close enough. Okay. And so anyway, the protagonist in this show is this man who was a deputy, a sheriff's deputy, and his kids were in the school, and he was out of town. He was in Utah getting something. And so he's hearing this, and he's rushing back to try to save his family, his kids. And he had lost his faith. And so he starts interviewing these kids. None of the kids died. None of the teachers died. Some were injured.
Wow.
Nobody died. And for some reason, the bomb, instead of exploding out like it was supposed to, went straight up. So he starts interviewing all these kids, independently in their homes. And they start talking about these people in white who had entered the room and had told them where to sit and had told them what to do. And then the people in white formed a circle around the bomb. And when the bomb went off, it couldn't go through the people in white. It went straight up. And so this deputy, he doesn't believe this stuff. He goes to the bomb expert, this forensic expert, and he said, I could not tell you why the bomb went straight up. It shouldn't have. It should have, the shrapnel should have been all around that room. He said, but that makes sense. It had to be a barrier that caused it to go straight up. And then the kids, people are saying, who are these people in white? So the kids start slowly looking through photo albums. And there are pictures of their grandmother who died before they were born, their great aunt. They all recognize one of the people in the picture, one of the people in white who had helped them that day. And it's a true story. And Reader's Digest did like a 30th anniversary story, and all of these now adults do not deny that happened to them.
I wonder why it's usually a story. It's not that I don't believe it. It's just, but you'll see that like there'll be that where people report that being protected, and then there'll be other scenarios where it's like kaboom and it happens. Like it's almost like it's written to happen that way. It's interesting.
And I think that's, it's interesting because it's the book I'm working on now deals with that question. Why do good things happen to, why do bad things happen to good people? And it's the overall answer is, well, we don't know, but sometimes, okay, it's Cokeville.
Correction. It's Cokeville. There's a Coleville in Utah and a Cokeville in Wyoming.
Okay. All right. Well, good.
Thanks for doing the research.
But I think sometimes there is a reason. Sometimes somebody we love dies of cancer so that their son grows up to be a great doctor and discovers cures for cancer. Sometimes those things happen, but sometimes bad people make bad decisions, and we're just at the wrong place at the wrong time. So yeah, I wish I knew the answer to that one.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I always thought, well, just maybe that was how their life was written to go. I don't know.
And maybe, yeah.
But it's interesting when you have children describe that, and the physical reality matches their description, but the physical reality is like it couldn't have happened unless
right,
something was there. That's really fascinating. Now, I wanted to ask you about Resurrection Mary. Have you ever been by there or seen anything even remotely like a sort of hitchhiking female ghost?
I have not, but growing up, so there's a radio station in Chicago called WGN, and it was owned by the Tribune Company. So WGN stands for World's Greatest Newspaper. And so growing up in Chicago, and WGN's an AM radio station, so you know how old I am. And every Halloween,
I used to listen to AM.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But growing up on Halloween, they would have a famous ghost hunter on, and he would do an online, radio talk show, and cabbies would call in, and they would talk about picking up Resurrection Mary on Ashland Avenue. Picked up this girl. It was really cold, and he said, and Resurrection. I've driven past Resurrection Cemetery. It's long. It's Archer Avenue, not Ashland. It's Archer Avenue, and it is probably a mile long. And they pick her up at one side, but by the time they get to the other end, there's nobody in the cab anymore. And I've heard police officers talk about doing the same thing, picking her up and having her disappear. So, but personally have not seen Resurrection Mary. But I believe it's an entity that does that.
I first saw it on Unsolved Mysteries, and it scared me, and I was like, oh my God. I was like teenager, and my imagination started to go, but I was like, I hope I never see a hitch. I hope I never driving and I like think I run over something that's a ghost because I could never leave. I would think I hit somebody real. Like, it would terrify me. I probably couldn't drive. I was like, I hope that never happens to me.
And you know what? I think that people that don't want to see ghosts won't see ghosts unless they need to. I mean, unless it's like something urgent.
Mhm.
But I think people who close, which is why kids see ghosts, because they haven't
Yeah.
closed their minds to it. They're like, oh, hey, look, there's a ghost. It's not like, oh, that can't be there because I don't believe in that. You know, they just they're there. They believe it. So
And that's the thing when they present, like, a lot of these skeptics on some, they put a documentary and they'll have people tell the story, and then, you know, the format is they present a skeptic, and some of these skeptics, I'm like, I can see why, just in their energy and the way they talk, I'm like, I can see exactly why you've never seen a ghost.
if I was a ghost, I wouldn't want to visit you. Yeah. Can I tell you my
Yeah,
favorite ghost story?
absolutely.
Thank you. I used to tell, and I guess I'm going to again this year. I used to tell ghost stories at our local historical society for the Halloween event, and so they'd put me in this one room schoolhouse that was on the property, and I would share ghost stories, but I would make other people share their stories with me. And so this grandmotherly woman stands up and she says that she has just finished visiting her daughter, son-in-law, and grandkids in Pennsylvania. And they have a really old house. And you know, on the East Coast, you can get really, really old houses because they've been
Mhm,
there a lot longer than Midwest or out west, you know. So
mhm.
um, she said they finished dinner and then they moved to the living room, which is just adjacent to the dining room. And from her chair, she could still see, you know, out of the corner of her eye into the dining room. And they were just visiting. And then she noticed out of the corner of her eye, this young man dressed in period clothing floating across the room, and he disappeared into the wall. And she said the surprise must have shown on her face because her 4-year-old grandson came over to her, took her hand, and patted it gently and said, "Don't worry, Grandma. That's just the attic people."
Oh, so confirmation or what?
Right? Right? I'm not going up to
I'm
the attic.
assuming that little one saw them all the time.
Yes, up in the attic. Yeah.
See, that's why people don't like attics.
You
And
know,
you're like, "I'm in my
yeah,
attic."
you know, it's funny. I was my son Andrew, who actually lives in Salt Lake. He
Nice.
he was up here for a while. He was using this as a bedroom when he was a teenager, and he was. So I'm going to tell a story on Andrew. Um, so he was breaking up with a girlfriend over the phone, and but he was FaceTime, so he didn't text her. You know, so he's leaning back, and it's not in the corner, which is one of the reasons mine faces a corner. It was just facing the open attic, and he's talking to her, and you know, going through the reasons, and she says, "Who's up there with you?" And he said, "Nobody." And she said, "No, no, no. I just saw a shadow go right past you." And he said, "Nobody. I got to get off the phone now." So he went back downstairs. But so, and we've seen things.
Wow.
Yeah, our house is haunted. You know, we've had lots of experiences here, and which is, you know, going back to the Goofy Ghost Adventures, you know, I've told my kids, you know, we have lived in this house for 30 some years, and we've probably had maybe 30-ish experiences. Uh, my son is listening and he just gave me permission. So after the fact, phew. um, but we've had, you know, 30 some really good paranormal experiences here. But I said, you know, when you look at that, that's an experience or two a year. And these
Yeah.
ghost hunters come into a house where they have 24, maybe 48 hours, and
Mhm.
ghosts don't do that. They don't work on command. And so you can try as much as you can, but you might not get anything to respond to you. And so,
Mhm.
especially if you yell at them and say, touch me, touch me. I mean, I just thought
Yeah.
that one.
Every time I've had a paranormal experience, it was when I least expected it.
Right.
I mean, and I
Right.
can, like, contribute and share an experience I had recently when I was working in Terri Reid, if you're interested.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So I was before I moved to the States, I've been here for about a year and a half. I was working in Terri Reid with seniors, so I'd go into their home and care. And I was going into the home periodically to help out with. He was a World War II veteran. He was very famous. He was a pilot. He basically shot down Nazis in, I don't know, South Africa. He was very famous, very awarded, and he was 102 years old. And his wife was 97. And so I'd go in there and help out. And of course, he passed away during that time, but his wife was still alive, so I would go every once in a while. She wasn't a regular, but every once in a while I would go and spend the night overnight with her to help her out because her son was there, but he wanted to sleep, so I'd get up with her in the night and make sure she went to the bathroom. And I'd been there a couple times, and she was lonely, she was upset, and because she'd been married to him for like 70 years, like forever. And she was a veteran as well from the war. And so one night she went to bed and I'd been up. I'd actually been texting my husband who was here in Utah. And I was getting ready to move. Actually, I was like planning it and everything. And I went to go lay down on the couch. It was late. And I was sitting there and I hadn't drifted off to sleep yet. I was about to. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I heard this like a radio, like almost like an intercom, like people chattering, like almost like airplanes communicating, and I was like, what the heck? It was like ba 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 ba, and I'm laying on the couch and I'm like thinking, do they have a police scanner in here? Like, what's going on? And I can hear all this like fire, fire, ba 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 ba, and I go to get up to go see what it is, and it stops right away. As soon as I get up on the couch, it stops dead. And I'm looking around and I look everywhere. I investigate the whole house and there was nothing. There's no radio. And I asked them the next time I was there, like, do you guys have a radio or this? She's like, I like, we built this house in the 70s. I'm like 100 years old. I don't have any of this technology. But I sat there and thought about it and it sounded like radio command, like weird and not modern. It was really bizarre and it spooked me out at first. But then I was like, okay, well, I don't know. But she would always tell me, oh, my husband doesn't believe in stuff like that. He's just like, I'm going and I'm moving on. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'm not going to tell her what I heard that night. It was bizarre. It was strange. And I was listening to it for a good 20 seconds. And as soon as I got up to go investigate, it just faded away and stopped. It was like gone. It was very strange. It was very strange. Yeah. And that was in 2022.
Okay, so recently.
2022. Very cool. Recently. And before that, I don't know. I've gone into people's house through palliative care. Some people, it was, good. And some people, it was, I couldn't wait to get out of the house. It was not pleasant. But that was an interesting experience because I certainly wasn't expecting a phenomenal experience. I was working and I was just like, woo, now I have a work experience to tell. And I don't have experiences all the time. Like the place I lived in, maybe it was built in the 60s or 70s. Like there was anything. So that was interesting. And he was, like I said, 102, very celebrated Canadian pilot that basically fought Nazis.
Neat.
It was interesting.
I had, because the community knows me, my poor children had to grow up having the scary mom, so the community knows what I do. And a couple of years ago, I'd actually gone into the bank I think I was getting a college checking account for Andrew. And so I was in the bank and the vice president of the bank comes out and she's getting ready to retire. So you kind of get her age, and she said, Terri, I got to talk to you. You got to come to my office. So I went in and sat down and she said, I need to tell you what just happened. And I said, sure. And she said, my dad just passed away. And I said, I'm so sorry. And she said, well, no, that's not the story. Her dad was in his 90s. And they had hospice care, and they're taking care of them. But the hospice didn't spend the night, and so her mom was worried that the dad would pass away in the night and she would be there all alone. So she asked her grown-up daughter to come and just spend the night, because they knew his time was close. So she slept in her old bedroom. I mean, these are people that, stayed in the same community in the same house, so here she's probably in her 60s and they still have her bedroom. So she's in her old bedroom and the door's open into the hallway. And her dad is in the next bedroom with his door open in case he needs to call out, she can hear him. And mom's on the other side of the house sleeping in the regular bedroom. And she said she wakes up in the middle of the night and looks out into the hallway. And there in the hallway is her grandmother, who passed away years ago. And her grandmother came from Italy, immigrated from Italy to the United States. And she said, my grandmother is standing outside my dad's door, yelling at him in her broken Italian, saying, and I'm not going to do this well. It's like, Joey, why are you not coming? We waited for you. Joey, come on, Papa's there. And she's going on and on telling him all of these people are waiting for him and he's taking just too long to die. And she's just listening to her grandmother yelling at her dad, telling him to, get his stuff together and move on. And then she said she fell back asleep. And that's interesting because I hear that a lot after these paranormal experiences where you think, I'm running out of the house. These people just fall back asleep. And when she woke up the next morning, her dad was gone. But she knew that her grandmother had come to take him with.
To take him with. And it's almost like I wonder if you fall asleep because the perception to hear that you're almost in a state of mind where you can't actually be. I know they'll say, well, that you're hallucinating, you're imagining it. I'm like, no, it's you're really relaxed so you can perceive it.
Yes. Well, and she said, Terry, why would I dream that my grandmother came to yell at my dad because he wasn't dying fast enough? And she knew it really was her grandmother who had come and just and basically brought her father home. Basically said, and doesn't that make sense that when we're graduating from this life to the next, that the people that would help us do that are the people who loved us, and
Yes.
brought us over. So yeah, I love that. But it reminded me of your story. It's just like, yeah, those are the people.
My husband suggested that my story was a time slip. It could very well be.
It could
But
be.
it wasn't like I saw him or anything like that. I just started hearing radio commands.
Yeah.
And there should be no reason why I would hear that. And I was in work mode, so I wasn't even in I wasn't like, hey, let's do an interview. I was like, okay, we got to get up here. We got to do this.
Right.
I was thinking work-wise.
Right.
And I was more relaxed because I laid down on the couch and I was like, hey, don't fall asleep. You have to be here all night. And I wasn't asleep. And I was just really more relaxed, I guess, because it was nighttime than I normally would be if I had a day shift. So that might explain it. That's interesting that these things happen. And it's a wartime. I mean, he was a wartime vet. And I went through the house like with his son afterwards. And I mean, this house was like a museum to like the 50s. Like there was a freezer from the 50s that still worked in there. Like I was just like in my glory with all the like 70s stuff they had too. I was like, oh my gosh, this place is a museum.
Nice. Really?
Yeah,
Nice.
it was great. It was great. And I actually am like honored I got to meet him before he passed away because he was pretty famous in Canada anyways, we'll put it that way.
Well, and one of the places that I did not like hanging around in our Historical Society Museum was in the basement. They had all of the veterans, things people had donated from the veterans who had served in all of the wars. And I have to say, I feel like sometimes items carry with them some of the, I don't know, echoes of the things that they had been involved in. And so, maybe what you were experiencing could have been something from some of those items that were around.
Yeah, well, I mean, the house was filled with a lot of his paintings that he had done. A lot of, there was a whole room it was probably his office. It was just decked out in his military stuff and everything like that from when he was younger. And you could like the energy. It has a little bit of a stale energy though, because it's so old and it's from a time period. It's really interesting. And I got that. We went into a county courthouse and did a ghost hunting thing. And it's where they tried Ted Bundy for kidnapping here. They hadn't got him yet, but the actual courtroom where they tried him, I didn't pick up Ted Bundy. It's just like a
Right.
stale feeling because they're like the energy is like now we just do it's city council stuff, so it's
Mhm.
kind of got this dull energy. So it's like I don't know. I guess it depends what you're doing every day from day to day, from time to time. You know, if you've got somebody who there's chaos all the time, like a battlefield
Right.
nonstop, then it's gonna be a little bit different.
Mhm. And the
But
energy
yeah.
you attract. So I had often when I'm up here in the attic writing ghost stories and I'm the only one home, I do freak myself out. You know, I do say, yeah, I need to go because I've had some attic experiences. And one of my favorite experiences was I often get up at midnight because I have a story idea. And I'm thinking it was 8 years ago. I got up at midnight, came upstairs to the attic. And at that time, I had a Bernese mountain dog, and his name was Riley. And Bernese mountain dogs are like St. Bernards, that kind of
Mhm.
size of dog. And Riley would come up, he'd follow me everywhere. So he had a couch up here, and he laid on the couch while I wrote. And it was probably about 4:30 in the morning, and I'm typing away on my story and I notice Riley's couch is like directly in front of me between my two computer monitors. And Riley lifts his head up and he looks over at the staircase, the attic staircase, and he wags his tail. And I figure it's my husband getting up. You know, he woke up and I'm not there, and he's thinking I better check on her. So I'm figuring he's coming up the stairs to see me. So I'm in the middle of an idea, and so I just keep typing away. And then out of the corner of my eye, I see this giant man standing on my staircase. And he's like a linebacker. And my husband's like 5'10, 5'11. Not this guy's, 6'3, 6'4. He's got overalls on, he's got a flannel shirt on, and all I remember was like his arm was huge. And and then I turn and I look and he's not there. And so I say to myself, well, you've been writing ghost stories all night, obviously you're imagining it. But then I remembered Riley saw him first. So we know the people who are the grandchildren of the people who built our house. And these people are in their 70s, now. So and so we have also seen and heard the woman who built the wife of the man that built the house. We've had ghostly experiences with her. But this is the first time this has happened. So he was asking me, he said, so their last name is Molnix. And it's like Molnix says, we call her Grandma Molnix when we hear her. So he says, have you heard from Grandma Molnix? And I said, no, but let me tell you about this other experience. So I start to tell him, but before I can describe him, he says to me, was he wearing overalls? And I said, yeah. And he said, and did he have a flannel shirt on? And it's freaking me out that he knows what this guy was wearing. I said, yeah. He's, and he said, and was he missing his right arm? And I said, well, I couldn't see his right arm because he was coming up the staircase. So all I could see was the left side of his body, but his left bicep was huge. And he said his grandfather Shriver lost his right hand in a farming accident. And so he had to do everything with his left hand. And so his left hand was huge. And it was creepy because it confirmed that that's who I had actually seen. And then I was at a convention in Chicago, and there's a fellow, Dale Kazmarek. Have you heard of Dale?
No, I haven't.
He is the president of the Ghost Research Society in Chicago. He's been hunting ghosts for over 40 years. He's the guy that they called to go to haunted, underground Edinburgh. And and so he and I both,
What was his name again?
his name is Dale Kazmarek. And I'm going to have to send you the spelling of
Mhm.
that last name.
Yeah.
It's the Ghost Research Society in Chicago. And he is the president. And he's done over 4,000 paranormal, not hunts, investigations is the better word. So he and I were chatting after both of our presentations, and I was telling him about this experience, and he explained to me that our eyes, are made up of rods. And we probably all learned that in like what, 5th grade? Our eyes are made of these little round rods are all together. But on the corner of our eyes, the rods are elongated, because they have to
Mhm.
take this, they go to the corner. And
Yeah.
they pick up a different spectrum of light than the front of our eyes do. And the spectrum that they pick up is the spectrum that the paranormal normally is in. And so when
So
we see something out of the corner of our eyes, it's not because they're
we're
misty or it's
hallucinating. Like
right.
all the skeptics will be like, "That's because you're doing it quickly out of the corner of your eyes. It's something real." And
Exactly. No, we're
yeah.
just using the right lens. The lens is for the paranormal is on the corner of our eyes. And he said, so Terry, when you turned, he was probably standing right there. And I said, I didn't need to hear that, Dale. I didn't need to hear that. But so, and he said, and if you can train yourself to just keep looking out of the corner of your eyes, and I've tried, I can't do that. Some people might, but so don't discount that
I'm
corner of
trying
your
to
eye.
do it. I'm like
I
trying
know.
to do it right now. I'm like, I'm gonna get a migraine.
Exactly. But that was really interesting to me that the corner of your eye is like that first radar for paranormal, and that's why we see them there. So
Wow. Did you
that's
guys
my
hear that, everybody? You're not hallucinating. All
right.
those times I've seen things out of the corner of my eyes, I might have been seeing something
That's right. You're
that
just
was
using the right lens. Yeah.
interesting. And do you like have you ever done stuff on like teaching people how to perceive the paranormal? Like are you into that? Do you focus on that or do you just say you experience it when you experience it?
I, I really don't, I mean, officially teach. What I do say is if you open yourself up to it, you have a
Mhm.
better chance of having it happen. And I think kids are, again, because they've opened themselves up, they're more apt to
Mhm.
do it. And if you believe it can happen, but then don't discount, like I have friends now who are psychics. I have never seen, I mean, the fact that I saw Grandpa Molnix was a one-time dealie, I'm sure. I don't see ghosts.
Mhm.
I I finally understand what it means when they say in your mind's eye, because I can close my eyes and picture something. I can picture somebody, but I don't see them. But I can feel
Right.
them. I can feel, I get lightheaded. I mean, there's different things. My daughter, Sarah, it's been really interesting. We've gone into places and we were in Galena, which is kind of an old town near us. And we were at a place that they do ghost tours and they sold my books. And she has a ghost. And Sarah looked at her and said, his name is Johnny. And she was shocked. And she said, yeah, a little boy named Johnny died in this building. And Sarah has no idea how she knew that information. And so each of us react. This person in the ghost tour place said that when there's something paranormal around her, she gets a choky feeling in her throat, and that's how it affects her. So not all of us are going to experience paranormal things the same way. We might get chills. We might just have a bad feeling. We might, I mean,
Some people
whatever.
get headaches.
Head. Yep, yep. And so,
Mhm.
so don't discount that you haven't had an experience. You just might not understand that that was the experience.
I think mostly like I said it's mostly been audible. I did have one experience after my cat died where I physically felt her walk across my head while I was laying down.
I,
So I've had that. I've never seen something like wow standing
right.
unless it was out the side of my eye and I treat myself. But maybe that happened. I don't know, and I don't remember. I've never actually strayed on. I've never actually looked and seen like a ghost floating or how people describe certain things. But I've certainly heard. Used to hear it in the house we lived in when I was little in New Brunswick. We used to hear the man. I used to hear him walking upstairs all the time.
Mm-hmm. We would do that.
Mm-hmm.
We had Grandma Molnix. I think equal time. Got to give Grandma Molnix a story. So we would always hear her as soon as we moved in. The kids, my son David could see her, and we couldn't. But I could close my eyes and picture her. And when I described her to the grandson, he said, "Terry, you've described my grandmother perfectly." So we knew it was Grandma Molnick's. And so we would all be downstairs and we'd hear somebody walking on the second floor, or suddenly we'd smell this really florally perfume kind of wafting through the room, or those kinds of things would happen. And one day, David was in high school by then, and we had a varsity choir. And the varsity choir it was kind of an upper echelon, we're the cool kids in the school because we're in the varsity choir. And the girls from the varsity choir decided to come out to our house and TP our big oak trees. And the girls, we live like 10 miles outside of town. So nobody ever did that before. And so we woke up Sunday morning and our oak trees got toilet paper wafting from them, which was really kind of cool. So David went to school on Monday and the girls came out and they said, "Did you like what we did?" And he said, "My mom liked it." And he was kind of embarrassed that I liked it. And then she said, "Why didn't your mom come out and say hi to us?" And he said, "Well, my mom was asleep." And they said, "No, no, no. She was standing in the window in the kitchen watching us." And he said, "No, really, my mom was asleep." And they said, "No, we saw a woman standing in the kitchen window watching us the entire time we were TPing. The only time we've seen Grandma Molnick's is in that kitchen window and up and down those stairs." And so David said to them, "Oh, yeah, you didn't see my mom. You saw our ghost." So we've never been TP'd since.
They're like, "Grandma Molnick's is watching us. We better not mess with that house."
And I think, you wonder why ghosts were here. I think Grandma Molnick's and Grandpa Molnick's watch over our house. I mean, I think the fact that Riley looked at him and wagged his tail, Riley's seen him walk through the house and look at things at night. The fact that Grandma Molnick's was watching those girls. And my daughter Sarah had some experiences when she was home alone and the FedEx guy knocked on the door and left something on the porch. And she waited till he left and she was going to the door and she heard a man's voice saying, "Who's at the door?" And she said, "Oh, it's just the FedEx guy." And she opened the door and she stopped and she realized she was home alone. And, and she said, then she sat on the front porch for a while because she didn't want to go back into the house. And then she realized,
actually
yeah,
had something similar like that happen here.
Really?
And my husband heard it over the phone. Something knocked on the door. The dog even barked or something. I can't remember it now. But there was no one, nothing anywhere. It was weird.
Yeah. But it's like guardian angel ghosts. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with guardian angels.
If it's a guardian angel, that's good.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, we've talked about mostly guardian ghosts. What about demons? What about negative things? Are those something totally different that you don't like to even cover? Or do you have something because they've got to be different?
I think they are. I think for me, I've had one experience that was really dark, and it was actually in Salt Lake City. I was doing a book signing at Barnes and Noble in the mall that has like an old fashioned train depot at the very front of it. And you walk through it and it's got the Art Deco floor and then you go into the mall and it's an outdoor mall. And so I was in the Barnes and Noble doing a book signing. And then I asked the person, "Where's the closest bathroom?" Because it was like a 3-hour book signing. And, I'm of that certain age that's an important thing. And he said, "The fastest way is just to go back into the train depot and there's bathrooms there." So my daughter Sarah and I went and we walked into the ladies' room and immediately were hit by this terrible feeling. It was literally that fight or flight feeling. You just knew something was awful. And Sarah started talking. She said, "Mom, do you?" And I said, "Don't talk about it. Just go to the bathroom. Don't talk about it." And so we quickly went to the bathroom, got out of there. And I said, "It's like somebody died in that room." And so when we got to our hotel room that night, I looked it up and some paranormal group in Salt Lake had a picture of a shadow creature poking its head out of one of the stalls in that ladies' room. And so
what building was this again?
It's the depot itself. So it's
wow.
Yeah.
And is that like downtown area?
Yes, it is downtown.
Okay, I know exactly where you're talking about.
Okay. And it was a dark experience. And so, I've written a couple books that I've shared ghost stories with. And it's funny, I wrote with another woman who's had ghost experiences too and collects ghost stories. And she and I combined and wrote this. It's called Ghosts, Graves, and Groves, because all of my books have trees on them. So anyway, both of us independently wrote a chapter about what you shouldn't do. And I feel strongly like I wouldn't touch a Ouija board, because and Dale Kaczmarek said that on his, when people ask him to do an investigation, he actually has a part where he asks people if they've done seances or had Ouija boards or anything like that. And if they have, he won't take the case. He says, because you don't know what they've invited in. And so I do believe that there's other entities. I don't know. I mean, I do believe that there's things out there that never had bodies, that were never human, that aren't really happy with humanity, and aren't
very parasitical.
Yes. And would like nothing better than to make us miserable. And so I just, I have had, no, it wasn't Trolley Square. It's on the other side of town. But thank you. That was your husband. But I have written about some demons in some of my books, and but I really don't like to dwell on it because I don't want to give them any more PR than they already have.
Yeah, you don't want to give them too much energy. Totally understand. I like the guardian angels and the beam of light kind of people who are protecting us. Those are better.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And who are our friends? Again, if we had like 6 hours, nursing home stories where the husband visits the wife and she's still in the nursing home and he's passed on. And the nurses can see how the air changes outside the door. And they go and talk to the woman and she says, oh yeah, my husband just left. I mean, those kinds of stories that give us that ghosts are people too. And that humanity and the knowledge that there's more. And not only is there more, but we get to experience with people we love. There's more. So
this is true because my husband's gone on certain things and we always find bathrooms can be a little strange.
Is it because of the water? Well, yeah, there's that too. But is it the water element maybe? Or is it just, yeah.
I don't know, especially older bathrooms. We've been in a couple places where we walk in the bathroom and we feel like something weird's happened in the bathroom. Maybe weird secret things happen in bathrooms that we're not aware of.
Maybe.
Because they're like, let's take it over here into the bathroom. I don't know.
My sister worked at the University of Illinois down in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. And on in the engineering college, and in one of the bathrooms she walked into, it was a Saturday, nobody was at the school. She walked into the bathroom and for a second she saw a woman hanging herself in the bathroom, and then the woman disappeared. And so,
The Rio Grande.
Is that what it is? It could be. I just know if you go through the depot area and then there's big concrete steps and you go down those concrete steps, to the right is a Barnes and Noble.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to track it down. Not that I want to know or unless it's their experience, but I'm not really worried because I've had certain negative things show up in my house and I've just gone, hey, get out. And it left.
Yes, good for you.
You've got to. You can't be afraid of it because that's what it wants.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, you do. You
just like your sister and the headless ghost.
Although I wouldn't be.
I would have screamed first.
Yes. Well, and I had a family come in that time that I told the ghost stories at the library. I had a family come and talk to me, and they had a ghost in their house. They were just a normal blue collar family, and they were explaining it was the husband, wife, and 2 kids. And they said every single day she comes up the stairs and she walks, they go to bed and they hear her walking the stairs, and she stops at each of the bedrooms. but she goes into the daughter's bedroom. And then she kind of strokes the daughter's hair. She said she can feel something cold touching her head. And so then I said to them, you know, you can go in to your daughter's room and you can say, you're scaring us. You probably don't realize you're doing this. You know, this is probably your house, but you can't do this anymore. And so they did say to me that they did that. She said she did it during the day, and I totally understand. That's what I would be doing it too. And she just stood in her daughter's room and she just talked and said, you know, I know you don't mean to do it, but you're terrifying my daughter. And then she said, then they still hear her walking up the stairs, and she still stops at all of the bedrooms, but she doesn't go into the daughter's room. She continues on.
That's excellent. I had that like once, but it was my grandmother after she died. She came into my room and patted me on the head like that. And I was like, "Oh, thanks." Like I knew it was her, and then she was gone, and that was it. That was it. It
It
was
was
done.
just, it was
Yeah.
love. Yeah.
I
I
didn't
love
feel
that.
bad about that because I could feel it and I knew exactly who it was.
Yes. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah,
It's like
so
cats jumping up on your bed after they've passed. It's like, oh yeah, I
exactly, that's what
recognize that.
happened.
Yeah.
It's a totally
Yeah.
different than if you're a child and some weird things coming in your room.
That's right.
That's
And
strange.
yeah,
Yeah, a
it's
little
nothing
different.
coming to the TV at you. Yeah, those are not the things we're talking about.
So, do you have, if you could go anywhere, just before we wrap this up, and then we'll talk about your weekly blog that you do, is
Okay.
there one place in the world that you would like to go that's reputedly haunted and experience and write about it or be there?
I would. I've never been to Ireland, and I know I've got Irish roots, and I've talked to so many people who've gone there and said, when even though they've never been there before, it's like going home. And I found out through genealogy, well, and I don't know how true it is, but potentially my great 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 great, you know, a bazillion times back was actually
Mhm.
buried in the hill of Tara, which is the hill where the ancient Irish kings were buried. And so I'd love to go back and feel if there's that connection. And I'd love to walk on roads that Roman chariots went down. I mean, I would love to, you
Mhm.
know, go into castles and just feel, you know, just kind of, and that's what I do. I absorb the feelings. I would love to be
Mhm.
able to do that. Yeah. That would be.
I have been to England and I went to the city of Bath where the Roman baths were.
Oh,
And you can't
yes.
actually go and walk the bath, but you're pretty close and you're around it. And that was pretty amazing.
I bet
Yeah,
that would be. Yeah.
it was pretty amazing.
That's
Um, yeah, I'd recommend it. Anyone
okay.
who's going to England to go check out Bath. It's very touristy, but still, it's hard to pick up because there's lots of people. That's the only
Yeah.
problem.
That's, and
Yeah,
so
that's
go,
the only problem.
yeah, go during the non-touristy time if there is one.
Yeah, or more northern England, you're
Oh,
gonna find places that are not commercial that might
okay.
have little remnants in different places in Hadrian Wall, and you'll find stuff
Pretty
northern.
cool. Yes.
Totally, 100%. All right, so we've done a lot of ghost story talking. I want to let people know where they can get your books, and you write weekly, like they can engage with your website.
I do a Freaky Friday every Friday at terrireid.com. And Freaky Friday can be anything from Black Eyed Kids to Bigfoot to doppelgangers. I mean, whatever catches my fancy and I do some research on. So they're just short little blog entries. And it's learning new things about all of the interesting things in the world around us. I guess that's it. We don't know what we don't know, and
Right.
that's why, you know, when people say, oh, there's no such, I think, how do you know? You know,
Yeah.
we don't know. And so yeah, so check out that, and all of my books are available through amazon.com, and you can just type in Terri Reid and it'll give you my author page because I've got like 40 some books. And so yeah, and start
Amazing.
with, if you're interested in loose ends, it's only 99 cents or on Kindle Unlimited, and start with that one because that's the first book in the series.
And you know, it's amazing that you're like, we're about knowledge and knowing things, because we talked before the show, and my friend who came back had NDE, she says one of the reasons we're here is for knowledge, is to absorb things and discover things and information and love and being good to other people.
Mhm.
But knowledge is one of those things where
Right.
we're absorbing knowledge for the creative force of the universe.
I
And
love that.
so I'm so glad that we can do that, and you're doing that with your blog and your books, and I want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. This was so much fun.
I know
Thank you
you'll
so
have to
much
come
for having me.
back.
I would
We'll have
love
to
to
do
do
a
that.
Halloween thing or something.
Oh, wouldn't that be fun? Yeah, just those
All
more and
right.
more ghost stories. Great.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm
Thank
going to put you out there. You don't have to hang around if you don't want to, and I'm just going to tie up the show, but thank you so much for coming on.
Thank
And
you.
guys, make sure you go to terrireid.com. Okay, guys, that was great. And I told my story that I don't know if I've told it before. The one about the World War II veteran that I took care of, and his wife. I mean, they were amazing. It was an amazing experience to even get to care for them, let alone have a paranormal experience that I wasn't even counting on. All right, guys. So remember, I think we're doing a tinfoil hat Friday. She does a Freaky Friday. I do a tinfoil hat Friday on this podcast. I think we're going to be talking about, we're revisiting Jim Jones. It's a little dark, a little crazy, but we're going to talk about some culty things, because I used to run a podcast on cults, and I've got a few people coming on that I know of. Well, I'm organizing it. It's been a hectic week for Emily. I don't know if she's going to be here on tinfoil hat Friday. Hopefully she will, but if not, we'll find some other people. But it's going to be 10 p.m. Eastern, because I have to work all day. Them's the breaks. 10 p.m. Eastern on Friday. And remember, visit the website. Of course, guys, subscribe, share, follow, rate the audio podcast 5 stars. It really helps the show grow. And go to the website, genxnewsx.com.